We also have a lot of bad people that have been here for a long time. People that whack people over the head with a baseball bat from behind when they're not looking and kill them. People that knife you when you're walking down the street. They're not new to our country. They're old to our country. Many of them were born in our country. I think we ought to get them the hell out of here too. You want to know the truth. So maybe that'll be the next job that we'll work on together. But I think getting them out, we forget about them. We had some bad accidents in New York, and they're not accidents.
It seems the latest weapon of choice for Trump and MAGA is denaturalization, trying to take away the citizenship of people who came to this country, went through the process, and are actually citizens. And they're not just talking about it in terms of the everyday American. He's out on the stage, Trump floating the idea of taking away Elon Musk's citizenship because he dared to speak out about the bill. We're also hearing Republican MAGA elected officials trying to talk about doing the same for Mandami after he won the New York City mayor race. They think this is their new tool, whether or not it's just to instill fear and make people obey in advance, or because this is the natural extension of their basically get everybody brown out of the country theme. Either way, what exactly are they doing? There's a June 11th memo that went out from the Department of Justice Civil Division from Brad Shoemate. He is a first-term Trump loyalist. He worked in the DOJ under Trump's first term. He left at one point to work for Don McGahn, who was the former White House counsel for Trump. So he is going to do Trump's bidding. And he put out this memo to his attorney across the country under the DOJ, instructing them on what to do with things like anti-Semitism. Of course, though, with this DOJ and administration, it really is about policing speech of people that they don't like. It's also about going after universities. They have in there talking about sanctuary cities and how to go after sanctuary cities. And then there is a provision talking about denaturalizing citizens. In this memo, I wrote contracts all the time as a lawyer, and there are ways that you can draft provisions, right? You can make them limiting or you can expand them. And this memo is written in such a way to give such wide latitude for what qualifies somebody to actually be denaturalized. It gives the attorneys in the civil divisions across the country such broad discretion, such wide latitude over who to go after and why. And this is no mistake. This is the weaponization of the Department of Justice in this civil division. But there is some actual law out there that the government is going to have to overcome in order to actually carry this through. So how much of this is just about instilling fear and how much of it is going to be about them actually getting what they want, that end game that they want? So my name is Dina Doll with the MeidasTouch Network. Let's break this down. The memo. Let me go ahead and read from the memo in terms of how what they are looking for, the discretion that they are giving these civil attorneys. And let's be really clear here. When they're talking about the ability to denaturalize somebody, to take away their citizenship, whatever actions, let's say that the government is going to try to say this person did, they shouldn't be entitled to a citizenship. It isn't an action that person took after they became a citizen. It's only prior to becoming a citizen. So let's say somebody became a citizen and then afterwards did like the worst of the worst crime or something. That doesn't come into play. This is about when you apply for citizenship, you somehow committed a fraud in this application process. You didn't reveal the fact that you are a literal Nazi, right? Or that you are convicted of sex trafficking in your home country. You basically then defrauded the government because you withheld this material information. And that's the point, the material information. And so you obtained this citizenship unlawfully. You did it by concealing important information. It's not a matter of something that you did here in this country. So this is what the government would have to prove, is something that somebody did prior to it, and they withheld that information, and that it was a material information that they withheld. So that's the initial thing. But this memo, so clearly, if you are somebody that's a clearly, convicted of sex trafficking, et cetera, like the more obvious and main things, this is something that has happened across administrations. Even under Obama, people were denaturalized because there are actually situations where you may want to do this. But as we have seen with Trump over and over again, they take a law that's in effect and then they make it illegal, either with the implementation of it or because they have broadened it to a point that it's not supposed to be broadened. So here's the memo. So the memo outlines 10 category of, let's say, actions that somebody maybe took that would enable a civil attorney to go after them for denaturalization. I'll just kind of quickly summarize them, and then we can go into the ones that are kind of highly problematic with Trump. One of them has to do with a group of people, let's say, who pose a potential danger to national security, right? That has a connection to terrorism, espionage. Another group is individuals who engaged in torture or war crimes. A third group is individuals who had some sort of criminal gang, transnational criminal organization, and drug cartel. A fourth one are individuals who committed felonies that they didn't disclose. A fifth one, cases against individuals who committed human trafficking, sex offenses, or violent crimes. Sixth one, cases against individuals who engaged in forms of financial fraud against the United States. 7 cases against individuals who engaged in fraud against private individuals, funds, or corporations. 8 cases against individuals who acquired naturalization through government corruption, fraud, or material misrepresentations not otherwise addressed by another priority category. Cases referred by a United States Attorney's Office or in connection with pending criminal charges if those charges do not fit within one of the other priorities. And the 10th one, any other cases refer to the civil division that the division determines to be sufficiently important to pursue. And this is kind of where, as like somebody who's written contracts before, I see like the red light flashing, because that last one is kind of what you would call a catch-all. If you're trying to put in a provision that, hey, if you didn't come up with an example, you're going to write something so broad to catch any other possible example that you may not have thought of. So this whole thing, so that last one, any other cases referred to the civil division that the division determines to be sufficiently important to pursue, basically means anything, right? This is so broad of a provision. They're allowing the civil division to determine, in their own opinion, what is sufficiently important to pursue. And this is what makes this memo so dangerous and is, frankly, I think, unlawful, because you have an actual law that you cannot just strip somebody of a denaturalization process, right? Unless this is like you committed this kind of material fraud on the government. That 10 last section is not saying that. It is saying that this attorney now can decide it basically for themselves. So what Trump, and that's why we're hearing Trump going out there talking about Elon Musk, and why we're hearing these MAGAs talk about Mandami, because in their goal, it is to allow anybody to get denaturalized for whatever reason they decide. And thankfully, we do have some law against, that helps somebody in this situation. And this is what we're seeing over and over again, that the justice system has been able to stop Trump in a lot of situations, and it is the only check on him, the only possible check on him. So the law on this is that somebody has their day in court. I mean, we have seen before where Trump has tried to deport people without due process. We may see that happen again. But technically, under the law, what happens is the DOJ brings you a civil complaint against you. This is civil, not criminal. A civil complaint against you. And then it's as if it's a civil lawsuit like pretty much any other. The government takes depositions. There's witness testimony. You, as a party, can take depositions, have witness testimony. They have to prove that you committed this material omission, that this fraud in your application process. And it's interesting because the standard here, this is a civil case. So usually the standard, the burden of proof is a preponderance of evidence versus criminal. It is beyond a reasonable doubt. Preponderance of evidence is usually seen as about more than 50% right. So it's not that high of a standard. Beyond reasonable doubt, as you can see, is a very high standard. And that's why we have it for criminal cases. You're taking away somebody's liberty. The standard in this situation is clear and convincing evidence. That's what the government has to prove against somebody. Clear and convincing evidence. That standard is somewhere between the typical civil standard of preponderance of evidence and less than the beyond the reasonable doubt. And it is the same standard that applies to parental rights. If you're terminating somebody's parental rights, that has to be clear and convincing evidence. Also, if you're trying to prove fraud against somebody in a civil case, it's clear and convincing evidence. So you have kind of a high burden that is meant to protect the person who is trying to be stripped of the denaturalization. This has been articulated and affirmed twice by the Supreme Court, once in the 1940s, once in 1981. The person in 1981 who the government was trying to strip from their citizenship was a Ukrainian who was a literal Nazi guard. So this is how rare and usually how the government applies this denaturalization, not this political theater that we're seeing here with Trump and trying to use it as a weapon. One thing that is, though, more difficult is that the person does not have a right to an appointed attorney. So if Trump and the DOJ decide to go after people without financial means, that person will be completely reliant on a nonprofit organization providing them free legal advice in this process. And perhaps those law firms that have fought Trump's executive order and won, perhaps they could do this pro bono work, because if the DOJ tries to carry through on this, there could be many people who need a free lawyer, because this process is not going to be easy to defend themselves in court and will certainly need a lawyer to help them. So that is this is because it's a civil case. And in our country, we only give free, let's say, legal assistance to a criminal defendant. And so that, so there's a lot kind of going on here with how this might get navigated between Trump and nonprofits and perhaps Trump and law firms who come in to try to help this situation. But we have to distinguish between Trump's fear-mongering and what he's actually able to do in court. And so far, this legal standard that the government would have to prove would make it very hard for him to do the things he's saying, which is go after political opponents, go after people with free speech. But this is what we have seen. We have seen him try to deport Mahmoud Khalil, right? We saw them trying to deport the Tufts student who wrote an opinion. We would not be surprised if they go after people for their speech. How this will get implemented is it will be up to where the person lives. So it would be in federal court because this is Department of Justice, but it would be depending on where you live. So you might have a federal lawyers, even in, let's say, Los Angeles, that might have a more liberal tendency and may not be willing to carry through Trump's directive here, versus in Texas, you might have somebody, more lawyers who are more pro-Trump and are willing to take this very far. And so we may see a different application of this memo depending on where the person lives. But that is to be seen. So if you have not subscribed yet, be sure to free subscribe. I'll be updating on this and the many other topics to come.
The truth is more important than ever. Check out our new Truth Over Lies collection at store.MeidasTouch.com. All 100% USA union made.